Okay, we'll get started. Hari Om everyone. Sorry for the delay. Om. 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 Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma Vishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Pathaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Kratitam Purana Muninam Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Radavarshini Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatvam Anusantatami Bhagavad Gita Bhavatveshini Namostute Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pulla Ravindayata Patra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajvalito Jnanamaya Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraika Panaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Geetamritaduhe Namaha Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Chanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja Aham Tva Sarva Papebhyah Mokshayishyami Ma Shuchaha. Something got into my eye. So friends, we are in the chapter called Vibhuti Yoga. And this Vibhuti Yoga is, of course, an extension of the chapters we have seen before, all the way from the 7th to the 9th. And it really focuses a lot upon the expressions of that Ishvara. Now, why is this important for us? It is important because it is only through these expressions that we develop the bhakti. And by developing this bhakti, we become closer to that Ishvara. As we've given these examples before, with electricity, for example, we know electricity helps us to do so many different things. The refrigerator, the bulb, all this, it really helps us to appreciate the power of electricity. And it is through this power of electricity that we develop a great appreciation, great admiration, I would say, or the great reverence in the case of Ishvara, to appreciate everything that Ishvara is providing us. So in that sense, all these, what should I say, these expressions really becomes an important thing for us to, develop that humility, that surrender, and it actually allows us to expand our vision to see Ishvara. So in and through everything that we experience in this world, that is nothing but an expression of that Ishvara. And this is what Sri Krishna really wants us to be aware of, because he's so concerned about our own, well-being. And through his discourse to Arjuna, he's trying to give us that ability for us to appreciate and experience Ishvara's glories. So that is where the chapter 10 is all about. It is actually about the yoga of the divine glories. So it is the word yoga, you know. Of course, in Bhagavad Gita, every chapter is nothing but a yoga. So I thought, what better than for us to actually reflect upon what this word yoga means? Because in the shlokas 8 through 10th that we're going to see today, we are actually going to be looking carefully at one particular word of yoga, which last time we just touched upon it, but here we are looking at it. So, that word yoga, I first want to hear from each one of you. How do you interpret this word yoga? It's a very simple word, but nevertheless can be taken at different levels. Yes, Anand?
Yeah, the word yoga, the meaning is yug, which is like to join two things. So that's the origin.
Basic word, yeah,
So
yuj, right? Yuj is the
yeah,
dhatu.
yuj,
We call that
yes,
as dhatu, yeah, or
yeah,
the root.
right. And
Mm-hmm.
then out, from which there are many yogas came, uh, like especially in the yogasana, all that there are
Mm-hmm.
different yogasanas we
Mm-hmm.
talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And also in Bhagavad Gita we talk of like sannyas yoga, like that means be like ascetic,
Yoga of
and then
renunciation, right?
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
right, renunciation. And then so again it's with join with a higher form. So that's what is yoga.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anybody else wants to add to what Anant has already
Can we,
said?
Hari Om?
Hari Om,
Hari Om,
yes,
can we
Meena.
say meditation, calmness, or steady mind?
Meditation, calmness, and steady mind are, I would say, the prerequisites
Hmm.
in order for what Anant just described, which is in order for me to connect with something, I
Hmm.
need to have a calmness of mind. I need to have a steady mind. So those are all the prerequisites for yoga to happen.
For an
So
yogi.
yeah, so this is why actually I wanted to bring this word yoga as such an important aspect here also. So uh, when Anant was saying that, okay, the word, but before that, I will also ask others what you have understood from the word yoga. But to your point, Meena, is meditation, all this is either a process, or you can say meditation is also a state of mind. Um, Meditation is also a process. Steadiness and calmness is also uh, it's a state of mind, and it is a prerequisite required before anything can before yoga can take place. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else? So as Anant started off, so the word yoga actually in yoga is a Sanskrit word, and in Sanskrit every word has a root. So unlike the English language where you have just words galore, in Sanskrit every word has to come from some root, which is then modified to give the actual verb or the noun. So you can have actually the same root which can be modified to give the verb and the noun also. In some sense, I guess in English, for example, the word meditation, what we said, meditate is verb, meditation is a state. It's and meditator is a noun. We can do it something like that, but in Sanskrit, it even goes a little deeper or at the fundamental level. Many of these roots are just, if we put it in English, yuj. Yuj is the root here. Yuj means to connect or to a union. It's the union of two things. And here the word yoga is important because in the context of 10th chapter, of course, because we are trying to connect ourselves to the higher self. So right from 7th chapter, we started analyzing, this whole aspect of what is this entire thing that we are in, right? So we talked about para prakriti and apara prakriti. Apara means the higher self and apara is the lower self. And this entire world is nothing but an expression of that immanence God. And that is what I had in my previous slide, which we discussed at length last time. I will only put it just for a few seconds to just to jog your memory on what it is. But the point is, the para prakriti is the higher self, and we all are part of that higher self. We are all that self, or consciousness or being. We are that. But we are unable to grasp that aspect of it, mainly because we are so much enamored by the lower aspect of that same self. And that's why I use the word electricity in the beginning, because it is only because of electricity that everything is working in our day-to-day life, right? I mean, the gadgets, that is. I'm talking about only the gadgets. It is that electricity that powers everything. So in some sense, without going too deep or analyzing it, we can think about that electricity is the higher self, and the bulb and the refrigerator and everything is the lower self. Okay? But it is that connection that is required between that electricity and the gadgets before anything can be of use to us, right? So there is a connection that is established. So keeping that analogy in mind and not going too deep into the analogy, just keeping that simple analogy. Now, if you use that analogy towards us describing who is that God, how are we connected to God? Later, we will actually go much deeper into Vedanta after we get into the third section of Bhagavad Gita, where we talk about Jiva, Jagat, Ishvara. All that aspect will come. But for today, in the context of the 10th chapter, the idea that this entire Jagat, this entire Jiva, which is part of the Jagat, all that is a lower self, and Ishvara is that higher self. It is Ishvara's expressions everywhere, and that connection which we are establishing is actually yoga. So yoga, of course, now in the realm of Hatha Yoga, it is the union of the body and the mind, or the Westerners would say body and the soul. But in our Vedanta philosophy, we don't think that there is something called as a soul, but we call that whole principle as the jiva, Jiva includes everything, and jiva is the one which actually goes through one body to another. But that connection of the physical body to that mind is what we call standard as yoga in a Hatha Yoga sense. But in the realm of spirituality, what we are talking about, it is the union of this individual jiva to the higher self, Ishvara, is the yoga part of it. So I wanted to make sure that we are very clear on this, because today's shlokas are going to be dealing with a lot of that yoga aspect. So any questions? I know we took about 10-15 minutes here, but I just wanted to make sure that is understood, because that's where we are going with. Yeah, go ahead.
Hariom, one question. So in the Bhagavad Gita, once each chapter progresses, they call it as Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Sannyasa Yoga, Mukhya Sannyasa Yoga. So which is like each aspect, right? And then how one unites with that. For example, with Jnana Yoga, he gets the knowledge of God, or So is that right? I mean,
Yes, so
understanding.
you can look into, like, for example, in the context of 10th chapter, and we will discuss about the Jnana Yoga part of it also is, so bhakti, jnana, karma, all these are actually ways in which we are establishing that union with Ishvara. So I repeat, bhakti, which is absolute devotion, surrender, is one way that I am establishing my connection. I'm surrendering myself. I'm establishing that connection with Ishvara. Jnana Yoga, how does Jnana Yoga help? So we today have so much amount of um, uh, different views of things. We are a bundle of notions, as they say. How do I get rid of those notions? In order for me to establish that connection with that Ishvara, the only way I can actually establish in the path of Jnana Yoga is through knowledge. So I have to remove all those notions. In order to remove the notions, I need knowledge. Simple thing, for example, if I want to know about water, unless I know what water is, I will not be able to have an understanding of what water is. And once I have an understanding of what water does for me, I'll be able to understand the various ways in which I can use water, right? So too, in the realm of spirituality, if I do not know what my true self is, today I am actually working in the world as this person, Sunitha, So Sunitha is doing this, Sunitha is getting upset, Sunitha is working hard, Sunitha is doing all this. I feel that Sunitha is the person. No doubt I need that identity. I mean, it's just like, for example, if I'm working for GM, I need that ID badge on my neck. Only that ID will help me do everything what I need to do at GM, correct? But the second I move out of the security gate, I show my ID and I leave the campus, I'm not a GM employee at that moment, right? So, but I need that knowledge for me to understand that I'm an employee only for that. So that is the Jnana Marga. That Jnana Marga, which will help me to establish again the union, the yoga. So yoga means union. Yoga means establishing the connection between me and Ishvara. Jnana Yoga gives me the knowledge to first understand who I am as a jiva. Jnana Yoga also gives me the understanding of what this whole Jagat is all about. And Jnana Yoga tells me that in the third section of Bhagavad Gita, that connection of me to that Ishvara. So that is Jnana Yoga. Karma Yoga is a way to purify my mind and to bring about that clarity of thought. So here, this is, if you look at the levels of these three yogas, Karma Yoga is a very basic one, which we all need to practice. Interestingly, the Olympic, India won a bronze Olympic, right? The first thing she has made a statement, and I think it's all over also, she has said, because she recollected Karma Yoga, right? Karma Yoga, Bhagavad Gita first, in how she won the medal. So Karma Yoga is the basic thing that is required for me to surrender my ego every time when I'm doing my work. It helps me to develop that surrender principle. And once I do that, then my mind is ready for Jnana Yoga. And when my mind is ready for Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga happens very easily. So this is the part of the three paths towards establishing that union. So good question, Anand. So now we saw that from Shloka 1 onwards, where Krishna is telling, knows that Arjuna is ready. And then in Shloka 2, he tries to tell, Krishna is telling Arjuna that aspect of himself as the para prakriti is something which is beyond the comprehension of even the intellect. So again, going back to the question that Anant raised, Jnana Yoga can take me to such an extent, to an extent of coming this close to understanding that yoga. However, even to go beyond that is this bhakti element which we need. And here he's trying to say that, even the greatest of rishis, the Sapta rishis, even they will not be able to comprehend to that level, that I am the source, I am that ultimate, I am the source for all the devatas who are responsible for the 5 sense organs through which I'm functioning in this world. So I'm even beyond that. So that was Shloka 2. And here we had just talked about how the significance of the 7 seers, which will again come up in Shloka number 7, actually. We'll talk about that. So here it is the Mahat Ahankara. What is Mahat? Mahat is the cosmic intellect. And then Ahankara is this individual personality, which in the totality also you can look at it. Just like, for example, when I say GM, individually, I'm a representative of General Motors. Maybe I shouldn't really use a word, a company, a private company like that, but I'm just giving that as an example. But in totality too, when I'm part of a certain organization, I represent that. So in that sense, here it is that Mahat, which is a total cosmic intellect, Ahankara, and then the Tanmatras. This is the 7 rishis. And then here in the third, we talked about how that Ishvara being unborn, beginningless, I need to have really a great viveka for me to keep on chiseling away everything that I think is the reality, but in reality does not. For example, in this world as I'm living, I'm looking continuously for happiness. Again, we are so habituated, like, for example, in the coffee that I'm drinking and anything else, my mind is so habituated to look for happiness only in these small things. But he's saying ultimately that ultimate happiness is me, and I am absolutely unborn, beginningless and everything, try to come towards me. So for that, this Viveka was necessary, because through this Viveka, first I can understand all the subtle ways in which Ishvara is manifesting. So gross manifestations we already saw in the 7th chapter, Bijam, Avyayam, he tries to show how I'm the seed, I'm in the rivers, I'm in the sapidity of the water, all those things we talk. But here he's focusing more and more on the subtle aspects. And that is why in shlokas 4 to 6, you will see the various values that he's explaining. So for example, in shloka 4, he talks about so many different things. He says, I am that intellect, I am the wisdom, I am the aspect of getting rid of delusion. Again, the idea being, again, using the example of electricity, I cannot see electricity. Electricity is like beyond my power of the 5 senses, correct? But I have to appreciate electricity. In fact, Swami Chinmayananda would call electricity yoga, you can only experience electricity when you put your hand on the socket. I mean, in US, of course, even the sockets are pretty safe, it's child safe, right? But imagine if you were to put a hand on this, and I was just reminded of a story which he used to say about how, this young boy, Swami Chinmayananda, would talk about, and that's not to deviate from what we are saying here, but this young boy, he comes from his village, he comes to Mumbai, he finds a job, and then he starts working, and then he decides to bring his mother from the village. And the mother is used to only, and this is of course an old story, right? So is used to only, the candlelight kind of things. She's not used to electricity. So she comes and she takes care of the house and everything. And then the son, asks her in the evening when he comes from work, he says, how was your day? She says, everything is fine, but you have a demon here somewhere. And he says, what is this? Then she says, every time when I put my hand on the socket, it gives me a shock. She doesn't say it's a shock. She says something happens to me. Some demon is possessing me. Swami Chinmayananda will really, dramatize so much this thing. So the idea being is we cannot experience electricity unless through these methods, right? So the subtlety of electricity is there. So here too, the subtlety of Ishvara is expressed in all these values. That is why he's bringing these values. So now we see even the reason for having these values in all of us, because it is only through these values I can actually experience the expansion. Otherwise, I will be so focused on my own needs of my own individual self, So the values are the things that really allow me to see beyond myself, to appreciate and everything. And that is where all these beautiful values are given to show the subtlety of and we have gone through this already. And then in Shloka 5, again, even more, so here, these are really, really deep values, right? Like intellect, wisdom, non-delusion, forgiveness. Each one of them, we can speak for hours. It's so deep. And then he comes to more of values that is a little more closer, which I can understand. Things like ahimsa, equanimity, contentment, tapaha, danam, yashaha. All these, I don't have to go through it, but basically they are all things that is also very necessary. It's almost sometimes I feel, Swami Shivananda's, I don't know if you've seen his spiritual diary, Swami, he would have this diary every day monitoring, am I fulfilling this? He doesn't have these values, but there are certain things of his diary. If anyone is interested, I think I have somewhere that thing, or of course, nowadays, Google Swami can give that anyway. But the point is, these are the subtle values which we need to cultivate in order for me to establish that union with Ishvara, right? So that's the, so after expressing all these subtle aspects, now Sri Krishna wants to show us how Ishvara is the cause for all these subtle expressions. And so he brings this aspect of the rishis, the manus, and the Sanat Kumaras. So these are the people who are the creators of all the living and inert beings in this universe. So, like for example, in Srimad Bhagavatam, where Srimad Bhagavatam is about the creation of the universe in great detail with all the stories, everything, right? So in Srimad Bhagavatam, it is said, how Ishvara first created Lord Brahma and then entrusted Lord Brahma with the responsibility of creating the whole universe. So what did Lord Brahma do? Then Lord Brahma actually, he created the mind-born sons, Sanaka, Sanandana, Sanatana, and Sanat Kumara. And then when he asked them to populate the world, they actually refused because they didn't want, they were very, very smart. They didn't want to get entangled with this enamoring world. They didn't want to do any material pursuits, nothing. So they took a vow of celibacy and roamed the world constantly, only contemplating upon Ishvara. So then what did Brahma do? He created the Sapta Rishis, the 7 great rishis. In shloka number 2, we came up, talked about it. Bhrigu, Marichi, Atri, Purastaya, Pulaha, Kratuhu, and Vasishta. So he created those Sapta Rishis. And then finally he created Manu, who was then entrusted with the procreation and establishment of the moral code, Manu Smriti. So it is said, there are 14 Manvantaras or periods of this Manu. So having created this universe, so Krishna says that all these original individuals are actually the expressions from the Ishvara's mind. Okay, so that is the connection which I want to, because otherwise, if you look at the flow of the 10th chapter, suddenly when you see 7 rishis, Manus, and this one, we might wonder what's going on here, right? So that is where this shloka, Maharshayaha Saptapurve Chatvaro Manavastatha Madbhava Manasa Jataha Yesham Loka Imaf Prajaha. So he talks about who are the 7 great rishis, then the 4 sages, and also the Manus. So these are the thing, and they all have the powers of Ishvara. And from this, they have been created. And subjectively, if we analyze this, it's basically nothing but the manifestations which, at the level of Ishvara, there is actually absolute pure self. There is, nothing at all. But the thought disturbances which comes is what is the expressions of all the initial, if we look at it from a philosophical point of view, at the you have Ishvara, and then you have just the thought modification. But in that thought modification, when you have a desire also, then there is some kind of a dynamism that is created, right? So then this dynamism actually is very powerful enough to create the whole world. And it is enough to destroy our peace and tranquility and everything. And that is the aspect of it which he's trying to show here. So that is the whole thing about 7 rishis, etc. Now, having understood the subtle expressions, having understood the gross manifestations to the 7 rishis, Sanat Kumaras and the Manus, we'll be wondering, why do I care? What is really important here? Why should I really know all this? And this is where I want to really focus on that word yoga, which we started in the beginning. So here we see, the key for this is actually, ultimately, is we need to start working on changing our vision of the world. We need to develop this vision. What do we mean by that? We need to develop this vision that ultimately everything is nothing but Ishvara. Like, for example, we see this happening in our lives through many examples, but we are still unable to you even use a simple examples. Even simple, our iPhone, iPhone today is probably in its version 16 or 17 or whatever, I don't know. But every time you change a phone, that phone, you put it into scrap or whatever, and that scrap then goes into a pure metal, gets bent out of shape, and then it's brought back again. So too with everything in the world, everything is nothing but recycled. But in and through everything, what is there which is constant? Right? So we need to develop that vision of looking at everything as an expression of Ishvara, which is the constant factor. Everything else is changing. So how do I develop this vision? So in order to develop this vision, we have, I think in one of the previous chapters, we had used this example of the spider, the spider when it creates the web, okay? The spider itself is the material cause for the web. And now that I'm here in this beautiful ashram here, one evening, literally you could see that spider developing a huge, like this big of a web, and it's still building, and still keep on building it. I have a picture. Let's see next week if I'm able to put that picture on the screen and really show such an amazing expression of Ishvara, The spider itself is the material cause, and the spider itself is the efficient cause. It is the creator and it is the material cause, So if I can just look at the world that way, okay, this whole world is nothing but that expression in a material form. Everything material that I see is nothing but the material expression. And the creation which is constantly happening is also nothing but Ishvara. So Ishvara is the material cause, Ishvara is the efficient cause, or the innovative principle, whatever you might call as the name. Everything is nothing but Ishvara. Imagine that web and this. I think I need to put that now. So too, one more example that we have given before is about the potter and the clay. But there it is probably, this example of the web and the spider is probably more dramatic. In the potter and the clay, the potter is the one who uses the clay to make the pots. So the potter is the efficient cause. The pot or the mud is the material cause. Both of them have to come together in order to form a pot, right? So too, if I look at the entire world, for everything, whether it's the trees, the hills, what I see out here, everything needs only two basic causes. And that is the beauty sometimes about Indian knowledge systems, is you look at everything, and if you drill it down to one cause, think about, there's so many things going on here, design thinking, everything you can think of, what is finally the cause of anything. So that is where the shloka 7 is coming, where he's trying to show that ultimately he's saying that all manifestations, whatever you see in front of you, okay, etam vibhutim yogam cha mamayo veti tattvataha. So we campaign yogena yujyate natra samshayaha. So he's giving this ultimate or the promise that if I can develop my vision, okay, going back to the one of the previous shlokas, where he's trying to bring about this connection here, where he's saying, so etam vibhutim. So he talked about the subtle expressions, the gross expressions, and ultimately they are nothing but the manifestations. Just like the pots are just a manifestation of the clay, but the clay alone is not possible. You need a clay maker, a pot maker. So too, here the manifestations require both those causes, the material cause and the efficient cause. And again, using the spider and the web example, if you look at it, so he's saying all this vibhuti is nothing but me. If anyone can understand this aspect, he says, then that person has already established, he becomes established. There is absolutely no doubt about it. But he says, tattvataha, they have to be really, understand that in its own essence. Okay. He who knows them in truth, in the unflinching yoga, he becomes established. And the word, this is where I wanted to come, avikampena yoga. And that is why I brought up today's reflection on yoga, which is avikampena yoga, or as he calls this, unflinching yoga here, or in my next one, I think I'll show you another way to look at this word yoga. So by this Lord's power of yoga, it means that ability where he is the one who is running through the whole thing. He is the one who's making everything happening. Okay. And so that is one way you can understand, Saha Avikampen, in that he becomes established. If he understands that aspect, if he is able to understand that union, okay. So this is just, of course, the word yoga can mean so many different things. It can also mean a concerted effort, everything. So here, there are two words, vibhuti and yoga, being talked about. Okay, vibhuti in yoga can also be actually called as the samarthya, samarthya and aishwarya, meaning the capacity. Vibhuti can refer to the capacity, and the yoga is the awesome power, the great power by which all these things are being brought together. So if I can just, etam vibhutim yogam cha, mama yo veti tatvataha, with all this, the greatest glories. And when we did started this chapter, I showed what the greatest glory we can think of, like in US, as I said, when you look at Grand Canyon or Niagara Falls, you are just absolutely spellbound. Your mind just quietens down, And the same thing happened to me when I see the Brihadeshwara temple here. You're spellbound. It's unimaginable these things can be made, right? So avikampena yoga means that unshaken, unsteadfast yoga. So the word vibhuti in yoga is very important here. So this whole manifestations that we are seeing are actually at the level of the totality, right? You could call this as a macrocosm, macro and microcosms. Micro is at the individual level, macro is at the bigger level. So imagine if I could transport myself into not this individual body that I have, okay, but I am in all the bodies, okay. It's very hard because we're so habituated to think of myself only as this body. But imagine that I am actually there in every body, Now, everything is nothing but an expression of me in each one of those bodies, right? So that is that manifold expressions. That is the vibhuti. So here, he's at the level of that macrocosm, all of them are manifestations. At the level of microcosm, there is this development of my mind, intellect, everything, right? If I can only go beyond myself and look at myself, of course, and look at everything, that is the level. But at the end of the day, that look at it ultimately is that it's me and me alone everywhere. That's what Krishna is saying here. Tattvata, in reality, Krishna is saying, ultimately, I am that only that power which is out there. But I am manifested everywhere. So this part of it is needed, and that is the vibhuti. And yoga is that aspect where I'm able to completely establish that union between me as an individual, microcosm, jiva, and the jagat, the manifestation of the jagat, which is this together. So this too is, and understand that ultimately everything is nothing but a play. So that is why this word avikampena yoga is yoga, we said, is union. Avikampena means absolutely, in the previous one, he said unwavering or other word that I saw in many of the books is tremorless. Tremor. Tremor means shake, right? So absolutely no shaking at all. Complete union, which is there. Okay. So knowing that Ishvara is a cause for everything and that everything originates from Ishvara, I have 100% confidence in this statement. That is Avikampena Yoga. Not even a little bit, anybody can shake me out of it. So those who have established themselves in that yoga which is unwavering, it's actually beyond the word faith also. It is like, that's it. I am 100% convinced that I am in union with that entire self. Nothing but Ishvara is there. Those who are established in that, they are the wise people. They are the only ones who have the qualification to contemplate upon Ishvara. So that's how powerful he's trying to say this. So just as an example, like, when we go to Disney World, right? When we go to Disney World, a child, like if you have, small children with you, the child can get completely enamored by Mickey Mouse and Minnie and Donald Duck and all of them. And, we just go and hug and everything, thinking that it's really it doesn't know that behind that duck, and there's actually a guy who's putting those things that only the father knows, right? The father is 100% convinced that all those manifestations that you see in Disney World is nothing but, it's not an illusion, but it's not fake either, but they're just manifestations, Even the ghost house, when you go to and you hear all those sounds, all that is nothing but this. The child gets enamored, but not the father. The father knows what the difference is, through. So that is how you can think about Avikampena Yoga. Any question on this one? What Avikampena means, it is so yoga taken to the highest levels. And the lowest form of yoga, as we all understand, the commonly understood way is the Hatha Yogas, establishing union of the body and the mind. But at the highest level, it is the absolute union. There is nothing else left. So many examples can be given, even an ocean, for example. The wave doesn't exist. There's just water, ultimately, So then in Shlokas 8, he comes to explain, so what is the technique by which we can achieve this unbroken experience? In chapter 6, right, there's an example of beautifully of the unwavering lamp, unwavering flame of the lamp, or even this unbroken, as you pour ghee or something which is highly viscous material, there is no break in it as it falls. So that unwavering thing. So he says that can be achieved by nothing but total devotion, by bhaja. Aham sarvasya prabhavaha mattaf sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samanvitaha. Aham, I am that prabhavaha, the beautiful word. I am the source of everything. And it's only from me. Matta sarvam pravartate. Everything is really come only from me. If I understand this, understanding me, if I completely worship that Lord with that idea, again, a change in the mindset. Every time when I go to a temple, every time when I'm in awe of everything, I have to continuously keep remembering, you are the source of all. You are the source of all. It's only from you that everything has come about. Iti matva bhajante mam. They worship me who are the Buddhaha, the wise people. and with bhavam, with that bhava of complete devotion. Ultimately, it is that attitude that is required in order to develop that thing. That leads to the Ravi Kampena Yoga, that devotion. Ultimately, aham sarvasya prabhavaha, aham sarvasya prabhavaha, matta sarvam pravartate. Krishna is saying that. And then in Shloka 9, he says, one who has developed this kind of an outlook will worship Ishvara all times because he is completely convinced. It's like the father who is convinced that in and through all this thing, ultimately it is that human being behind the clothes, right? So too, it is Ishvara behind all those illusions and everything. And such a person will be constantly, what is the benefit out of this? He's saying the benefit is ultimately that person will be always equanimous, always in a calm state of mind. He'll never really experience sorrow. That doesn't mean that he will not go through disturbances in life. I mean, he will go through what he has to go through because of his own previous prarabdha. But the attitude in which he faces that changes. So when I say that I'm sad or I'm depressed or anything, it is actually a feeling from an ignorance. If I understand that this is supposed to happen to me, and that is only happening, but my mind is not, I do not allow my mind to go with what the experience is happening, then my mind becomes calm. So a person who has practiced this Avikampena Yoga, and this Avikampena Yoga has come about because he has truly understood that knowledge. So when I mentioned again the levels of karma, jnana, and bhakti, when I have that thing, when I understand that Ishvara is the cause for everything, and Ishvara is my ultimate goal, then it becomes very easy. And that is what he says in 9, Machitta mat gata pranaha bodhayantah parasparam kathayantascha mam nityam tushyanti cha ramanti cha. So such a person with whose mind is completely in the Ishvara, the life is absorbed, pranaha, everything that he does, he's completely absorbed. Bodhayanta parasparam, and he's constantly reveling in the company. In Bhajagovindam, there are beautiful shlokas, Yogaratova, Bhogaratova, Sangaratova, Sangavihinam. There are two very beautiful shlokas which really echoes that life of renunciate, that person who has understood this union. Kathayantascha mam nityam, ever speaking of only that Ishvara. They are completely tushyanti, completely satisfied, and ramanti, they're also delighted. Constantly, they're talking only about the greatness of that Ishvara. So when such kind of devotion, which is expressed towards Ishvara, the result, of course, has to be completely extraordinary, right? So this is what is taken up in this next shloka number 10, where he says, Tesham satati yuktanam. So for somebody who has understood this knowledge, this jnana yoga of what, who is running this world, who is the biggest boss, Tesham satati yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti te. Dadami. So to that person, to one who is completely steadfast, who is understood, who is worshipping, who is full of love, okay? Krishna says, to him, I bestow the knowledge of yoga by which they come to me. So that person is endowed with even more, a more purified intellect. Buddhi yogam, and by which, they come to, so the devotees are graduating to different levels, where slowly and slowly they recognize that this world is, they've chewed it enough, and there is very little interest, and he's completely the disposal of the Lord. He becomes steadfast, and in this sadhana, he's plunged into completely fully immersed in love. So that is, he gives them buddhi yoga, which is actually a superior form of intellect, one may say, and understanding. So when that superior form of yoga is naturally, the mind itself works at a very different level, just like, for example, in a simple company, since most of you live in Detroit, I mean, you can imagine somebody who is at the assembly line, his mind is only focused on putting the knobs or the screws on this. But the CEO of the company has to look at putting the knobs and screws on so many different cars, so many different things. He has graduated to that level. Now you can imagine with this Buddhi Yoga, you graduate at an even much higher level, because it's not just focused on, say, Ford Motor Company or GM or anything, but it is the entire world. So this is not about actually Krishna saying that Krishna's making this. Each one of us has the ability to rise to that level. It is an absolutely superior form of yoga. So that is the ultimate benefit of going to this level. So that is what ultimately covers in the up to 10th shloka. Then in 11th shloka, we will see from next week about what is the main obstacle then that Ishvara is removing with this knowledge. So, we have talked about so much, what are the benefits, everything, and we'll see that next week. Any questions or thoughts before we sign off? We'll do it next week then. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Om shanti shanti shanti. Om purnamadav purnamidam purnat purnamudachyate purnasya purnamadaya purnameva vashishyate. Om shanti shanti shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.
Hari Om. Thanks, Sunitha ji.
You're welcome. Harihi Om.
Thank you so much, Sunitha.
You're welcome.
Hari Om, thank you so much.
You're welcome. See you. Now I see this live on custom service. I didn't see that before.
Have you stopped the recording?
Now I'm